Hi guys, it's Maureen. Welcome back to my little English page. Today's video was actually made for teachers, but if you are an English learner, just go ahead and practice your listening for a bit. So I wanted to talk to you about little easy tricks that you could apply in your class to make the whole class go smoother. Smoothly? Smoothly. Go smoothly. One of the most important tips for me is training your students. So let me explain that. You want them to know how you work and what your reactions mean. This means that whenever you correct your students, it will go a lot easier. For example, one very common mistake that my students make is they forget the S in third person singular. All I do is this. Straight away, they know they made a mistake and they can correct themselves straight away. I give them that opportunity, that chance to correct themselves without interrupting them. Correcting your students is essential. We all learn through making mistakes, being corrected and improving from there. You also want to be careful though at how you correct your students. It's good to correct, but you don't want to over-correct and kind of break their confidence. What I focus on the main mistake or the main two mistakes that a student might make in a sentence, and those are the ones that I correct. Because those students that feel a little bit shy might break down just because you're correcting them too much. So focus on what is really essential for you to understand what they're trying to say, and the rest will follow little by little. But first, focus on what is essential, and once those essential mistakes are corrected, then you'll move on to smaller mistakes, and little by little, the whole overall of their language speaking abilities will improve. I mentioned earlier somehow training your students to gestures and commands that you use, but there's also the use of body language in general that is extremely important. Especially for lower level students, you don't want to just stay stiff and just talk, because if you tell your students to do something, they're not going to understand it straight away. So use your body to indicate what you want them to do. If you want them to go from A to B, show them that you want to go from A to B. You might have noticed in some of my videos that I use my head a lot to say yes, no, and at first it seems very, very unnatural as a teacher, as a person to do that, but the more you do it, the easier it becomes. And you are also making it easier for those students that actually understand very little of English, because if they can understand what you want them to do through body language, then they will start associating those gestures to words that you might have pronounced or said at the same time. See? Said at the same time. You're probably like me and you have students with very different ages. If most of your students are within 20 and 25 years old, then you probably wouldn't have that problem, but if your students are older or younger, they might not know how to take notes. 20 to 25-year-olds usually are in college or just out of college, which means they've had to practice taking notes for at least 4 or 5 years. Whereas older students and younger students don't have to do that. So whenever you're explaining something, and if you don't write it on the board, half of your students will not know what you said, or they might have just been listening to you and not trying to take notes, but just assimilate and understand what you said. And if that's the case, well, those students will never ever have those notes or that information somewhere written, which means they'll never actually learn it. Depending on the type of classes that you're teaching, if it's something that's annual, intensive, super intensive, you might or might not be able to apply this little trick that I'm going to teach you, because it is easier to apply that when you have a bit more time in your class. But when I do have the time, I try to finish my classes with a little cooler. So it's a little fun activity where they get to kind of move around, play with their partners, and this is really good because first, they go home thinking about the very last activity, which is a fun one. And secondly, try to focus your little cooler on the grammar points that you covered that same day. For example, if I have covered present perfect, well, I'm going to play never have I ever at the end of the class. Students love it, it's really fun, and they're not necessarily realizing that you're reinforcing what you taught them, but they are. So it's double practice and it's a win-win for the students and for you. But once again, I am aware that you cannot always throw that in your class. So maybe that could be a weekly thing on the last day. You could always throw in a little cooler like that, and if you do that, you could also have a weekly warmer, which would be on the very first day, where you just have a little introduction activity where you perhaps introduce the vocabulary of the unit, something like that. This is the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching. I will make more videos like this one with tips, activity ideas, where I can share my experience as a teacher as well. But meanwhile, if you have some things that you'd like me to go over or any particular requests, go ahead and comment right below, and I will try my best to turn those requests into videos. Thank you so much and see you soon, guys. Bye!